Captain Hana floated through the twisted metal remains of what used to be the biggest space battle in recent history. Her small salvage ship moved slowly between the broken pieces of warships and fighter craft. The battle had ended 3 days ago, but valuable technology still drifted in the void, waiting for someone brave enough to collect it. The silence of space surrounded her as she piloted through the graveyard of ships. Each piece of debris told a story of the fierce fighting that had happened here. Plasma burn scarred hull plating, and emergency lights still blinked weakly on some of the larger pieces. This was dangerous work, but salvage was how she made her living. Her scanner beeped softly, showing something unusual on the display. Most debris was cold and lifeless, but this reading showed heat and what looked like a weak life sign. Hana frowned at the screen. Nothing should be alive out here after 3 days in the vacuum of space. The signal came from inside the remains of a coalition dreadnought. The massive warship had been broken in half, its front section spinning slowly, as it drifted away from the battle site. Hana maneuvered her ship closer, looking for a way inside the wreckage. She found an opening where the ship's hull had been torn apart by weapons fire. The hole was just big enough for her to fit through in her spacesuit. Hana knew this was against every safety rule she had ever learned. Entering unknown wreckage alone was how salvagers died. But something about the life sign on her scanner made her curious. After putting on her spacesuit and checking her air supply, Hana used her suit's thrusters to fly through the hole in the dreadnought's hull. Emergency lights cast strange shadows as she moved through the damaged corridors. The ship's gravity was gone, so she had to push off walls to move forward. The life sign was getting stronger according to her suit's scanner. She followed the signal deeper into the ship, past broken machinery and floating debris. The corridors were twisted from the battle damage, making it hard to find her way. Finally, she found what her scanner had detected. In what used to be the ship's cargo bay, something glowed with soft blue light. As she got closer, Hana saw it was an egg. Not like any bird egg she had ever seen, but something much larger and made of what looked like living crystal. The egg was about the size of her torso and pulsed with inner light. Thin lines of energy moved beneath its surface like veins. As she watched, small cracks began to appear across the crystal shell. Something was hatching. Hana backed away, not sure what to expect. The cracks spread quickly, and she could hear small scratching sounds even through her suit's audio system. A tiny claw broke through the shell, then another. Whatever was inside was working hard to get out. The creature that emerged was unlike anything in her memory of Earth's old stories about dragons. This being had scales that seemed to shift color as they caught the light, changing from deep blue to silver to black. Its eyes were large and held an intelligence that made her uncomfortable. Most strange were its wings, which seemed to bend, the light around them in ways that hurt to look at directly. The newborn creature made a sound that was not quite a roar or a cry, but something that seemed directed at her with clear purpose. It was asking her something, though she had no idea what. When Hana slowly reached out her gloved hand, the little dragon pressed its snout against her palm. Suddenly, her mind filled with thoughts that were not her own. She felt gratitude, recognition, and something that felt disturbingly like the creature was claiming her as its own. The mental contact lasted only a moment, but it left her shaken. The baby dragon looked at her with those intelligent eyes and made another sound. This time, Hana somehow understood it was hungry. She looked around the damaged cargo bay and realized she needed to get both of them out of this wreck before her air ran low. Getting the dragon back to her ship was easier than expected. The creature seemed to understand the danger and stayed close to her as they made their way through the twisted corridors. Once aboard her vessel, Hana set up a temporary nest in Cargo Bay 2 using spare blankets and heating units. She named him Jinwoo, though she was not sure why that name felt right. The little dragon seemed to approve, tilting his head when she said it. Hana tried feeding him emergency rations, but Jinwoo showed no interest in human food. Instead, he moved to a metal bulkhead and began scratching at it with his claws. To her amazement, the metal began to change under his touch. It became softer, more flexible, taking on a slightly organic appearance. Jinwoo ate small pieces of the transformed metal, and the scratches he had made began to glow with the same blue light as his egg had shown. Over the next few hours, as her ship traveled toward the nearest trade station, Jinwoo grew visibly larger. By the time they reached their destination, he had doubled in size and had made concerning changes to his sleeping area. The metal walls now had strange patterns carved into them, and they pulsed with faint bioluminescence. The trade station's docking controller contacted her ship as usual, but something was wrong. When the alien traders saw her cargo bay through the security cameras, they became agitated. Their universal translators filled her communication channel with warnings about void spawn and ship takers. The station master refused to let her dock. All trade had to be conducted through automated drones with no direct contact allowed. Hana found herself barred from the station she had used for years, all because of the small dragon in her cargo hold. As she piloted away from the station, Jinwoo came to the bridge and looked out at the stars. He made a soft sound that somehow conveyed satisfaction and pressed his growing bulk against her chair. Hana realized she had not just rescued an exotic creature. She had saved something that the galaxy already knew and feared. The question was whether she had made the biggest mistake of her life, or stumbled onto something that would change everything she thought she knew about the universe. As Jinwoo curled up next to her pilot seat and began to purr in a way that made the ship's hull vibrate, Hana suspected it might be both. 3 weeks had passed since Hana rescued Jinwoo from the battle wreckage. She woke up in her small captain's quarters feeling like something was different about her ship. The walls hummed with a sound she had never heard before, and the air felt strange against her skin. Hana got dressed and walked toward the bridge, but stopped when she realized the corridor was wrong. The hallway that should have led straight to her command center now curved to the left in a way that made no sense. She had walked this same path every day for 5 years, but now it felt like she was in a completely different ship. Following the new path, she found herself in a chamber that definitely had not existed yesterday. The room was huge, much larger than her cargo bay had ever been. The walls were covered with crystal formations that glowed softly and seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. The air in the room was warm and humid, filled with a sweet smell she could not identify. In the center of this impossible room, Jinwoo was sleeping. He had grown again, now the size of a large dog, and his scales had taken on new colors that shifted from deep purple to bright gold as he breathed. Around him, the crystal formations grew in perfect spirals that hurt her eyes to look at directly. Hana backed away slowly, trying to understand what she was seeing. Her ship was a standard salvage vessel with a known layout and limited space. There was no way this chamber could exist within her hull without breaking basic laws of physics. Yet here it was, and somehow Jinwoo had created it. She made her way to the bridge through corridors that now branched in directions that should not exist. The command center looked mostly normal, but even here she could see changes. Bioluminescent veins ran along the walls like living circuits, pulsing in rhythm with her ship's power systems. When Hana tried to access her ship's computer, the AI did not respond as usual. Instead of the cheerful voice that had kept her company, for years she heard only silence. The screen showed system diagnostics, but half the readings made no sense. Power flows that should not exist, structural modifications that the computer could not explain, and energy signatures that did not match any known technology. She spent hours trying to understand what had happened to her ship. The hull readings showed that her vessel was somehow larger on the inside than on the outside. The power systems were running at twice their normal efficiency, drawing energy from sources that should not exist. Most disturbing of all, the computer core showed signs of organic integration, as if living tissue had grown into the circuits. When Jinwoo finally woke up and came to the bridge, Hana confronted him. She pointed at the displays showing impossible readings and demanded answers. The young dragon looked at her with those intelligent eyes and pressed his snout against her hand. Again, her mind filled with thoughts that were not her own. But this time, the mental contact was clearer and more detailed. She saw images of improvement, efficiency, and safety. Jinwoo was not destroying her ship. He was making it better. In his mind, the changes were gifts, ways to help her survive in a dangerous galaxy. The mental connection showed her glimpses of how he saw the ship. To Jinwoo, her vessel was not just a machine but a living system that could be grown and shaped. The metal and circuits were raw materials that could be transformed into something far more advanced. The modifications were not random but followed patterns that had been used for millions of years by his kind. Over the next few days, Hana learned to navigate her changed ship. The corridors now led to rooms that served specific purposes, even though she had not planned them. A medical bay had appeared, filled with healing crystals that somehow knew how to treat human injuries. The food storage area now produced fresh supplies through processes she did not understand but were clearly safe. The first real test of the ship's new abilities came when they encountered pirates near the Vega system. 3 attack ships surrounded her vessel, demanding she surrender her cargo. Hana prepared for the usual running battle, knowing her salvage ship was no match for military craft. But when the pirates opened fire, something amazing happened. Her ship moved like no human vessel ever had, seeming to slip sideways through space to avoid the incoming weapons. The hull absorbed direct hits from plasma cannons without taking damage, and the energy from the attacks was somehow collected and stored in her power systems. The pirates tried to board her ship using magnetic clamps and cutting tools. When their boarding pods attached to her hull, Hana watched in amazement as acidic substances began to dissolve the enemy equipment. The pirates found themselves unable to cut through her hull as it seemed to heal itself faster than they could damage it. Jinwoo appeared on the bridge during the fight, his scales now glowing brighter than she had ever seen them. Through their mental connection, she felt his protective instincts. The ship was not just her vessel anymore, it was his den, and no threat would be allowed to harm what he had claimed as his territory. The pirate ships finally gave up and fled when their weapons proved completely ineffective. As they jumped away to hyperspace, their communications channels filled with frightened chatter about ghost ships and cursed vessels. Word would spread quickly through the criminal networks about the salvage ship that could not be damaged or boarded. After the battle, Hana sat in her captain's chair and tried to process what her life had become. Her ship was no longer recognizable as the vessel she had purchased years ago. It moved through space using principles she did not understand, defended itself with weapons that should not exist, and seemed to anticipate her needs before she knew them herself. Jinwoo curled up next to her chair, his presence in her mind now, a constant comfort rather than an intrusion. Through their bond, she began to see visions of vast spaces between stars where his kind had once lived. She saw images of living ships that spanned entire solar systems and civilizations that had learned to merge biology and technology in ways that made them nearly immortal. She was starting to understand that Jinwoo was not just a rescued animal, but something far more significant. He was the key to technologies that could change everything about how humans traveled through space. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for that kind of change, and whether she was strong enough to handle the responsibility that came with it. The transformation of Hana's ship continued to accelerate as they traveled deeper into space. Each morning brought new changes that should have been impossible. The bridge had become something that looked more like a living nerve center than a command deck. Glowing tendrils connected her pilot's chair to systems throughout the ship, allowing her to control everything with just her thoughts. Jinwoo had grown again, now the size of a small horse. His scales had developed patterns that seemed to shift and change as she watched them. When he moved through the ship, the walls would literally part to make room for him, then seal themselves back together once he had passed. It was as if the entire vessel had become an extension of his body. The most disturbing change was what was happening to Hana herself. Extended contact with Jinwoo's neural network was changing her brain in ways she could feel but not fully understand. She found herself knowing things about the ship's systems that no one had ever taught her. Complex navigation calculations that should have taken hours now happened in her head in seconds. When she looked at star charts, she could see patterns and connections that had never been visible before. Trade routes that seemed inefficient suddenly made perfect sense when viewed from a perspective that took into account gravitational currents and energy flows she had never known existed. It was exciting and terrifying at the same time. Other ships began following them, drawn by rumors of the ghost vessel that could disappear from sensors and reappear anywhere it wanted. At first, it was just scavengers and small-time pirates hoping to steal whatever technology made her ship so special. But word spread quickly through the galaxy's communication networks, and soon more dangerous hunters were on their trail. Coalition scouts started appearing at the edges of sensor range, always, keeping their distance but clearly watching and recording everything they could. Military analysts were trying to figure out what they were dealing with, and their reports were reaching the highest levels of government. Hana's ship had become a priority target for capture and study. The first serious attempt to stop them came at the Kepler Junction, where 3 Coalition destroyers were waiting in ambush. The military ships powered up their weapons as soon as Hana's vessel dropped out of hyperspace, demanding immediate surrender and threatening to open fire if she tried to run. Jinwoo's response to the threat was swift and creative. The ship's hull began to shift and change, taking on properties that confused every sensor the destroyers had. To their targeting computers, Hana's vessel appeared to be in 6 different locations at once. When they fired their weapons, the energy beams passed harmlessly through empty space while her ship materialized somewhere completely different. But Jinwoo was not content to simply avoid the attack. As the destroyers continued firing, her ship began to emit strange energy pulses that interfered with their power systems. One by one, the military vessels found their engines shutting down and their weapons going offline. They were left drifting, helplessly as her ship approached them. Through the neural link, Hana felt Jinwoo's curiosity about the other ships and their crews. He was not interested in destroying them, but rather in understanding how they worked and why they had attacked. Using abilities she was still learning to control, she extended the ship's bio-neural network to make contact with the Coalition vessels. The results were immediate and dramatic. The destroyer's computer systems began integrating with her ship's hybrid network, sharing information and capabilities in ways that their designers had never intended. The military crews found their ship's performance improving dramatically, even as they lost control of their own systems. Captain Sungmin, the commander of the lead destroyer, managed to establish direct communication with Hana through the merged network. His voice carried both amazement and fear as he asked what she had done to his ships. When she tried to explain about Jinwoo and the biological modifications, he refused to believe what he was hearing. Through the enhanced communication system that Jinwoo had created, Hana was able to show Captain Sungmin things that military science said were impossible. She demonstrated faster-than-light travel without using jump drives, showed him energy shields that seemed to violate the laws of physics, and gave him glimpses of weapon systems that could turn enemy missiles into beautiful crystalline sculptures. But the most important thing she shared with him were Jinwoo's visions of what was coming from outside the galaxy. Through the neural link, Captain Sungmin saw images of a threat that would make current military technology completely useless. Vast entities that consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but dead space in their wake. They were coming, and humanity was not prepared to face them. The Coalition officer's demand for surrender changed to something very different when he understood what Hana was trying to tell him. Instead of capturing her ship for study, he began asking questions about how the technology worked and whether it could be shared with the military. The threat from outside the galaxy was real, and traditional weapons would be useless against it. Jinwoo's mental presence conveyed concepts that had no human words. The dragons had been preparing for this threat for millions of years, but they could not face it alone. They needed to merge with younger species, creating hybrid civilizations that could survive what was coming, and perhaps even find ways to stop it. The modifications to her ship were just the beginning. The biomechanical technology could be scaled up to transform entire fleets, space stations, and even planets into living systems capable of defending themselves. But it required willing cooperation from both species, a partnership that would change what it meant to be human. As Captain Sungmin's destroyers began their journey back to Coalition headquarters, their crews carried with them small samples of Jinwoo's bio-neural technology. They would serve as proof of what Hana had shown them, and hopefully convince the government that humanity needed to evolve or face extinction. Hana watched the military ships disappear into hyperspace and wondered if she had just saved her species or doomed it. The choice was no longer hers to make. Word of the dragon technology would spread through the coalition like wildfire, and soon everyone would have to decide whether they were willing to change or preferred to face the coming darkness. With weapons that could not protect them, the coalition's response was swift and predictable. Within days of Captain Sungmin's report reaching headquarters, military ships surrounded Hana's vessel wherever she tried to dock. Orders came through on all emergency channels demanding her immediate surrender and the separation of the alien creature from human contact. Admiral Daewon led the first serious attempt to capture her. His battle group included 12 heavy cruisers and a detention ship specifically designed to hold dangerous prisoners. The admiral believed that overwhelming force would convince Hana to give up without a fight. He was wrong about that. When the coalition ships tried to disable her vessel with electromagnetic pulse weapons, Jinwoo responded by phasing the entire ship partially out of normal space. The military weapons passed through empty air while her ship remained perfectly visible, but untouchable. The admiral's weapons officers reported that their targeting systems could not lock onto something that existed in multiple dimensions at once. The detention attempt became even more embarrassing when the coalition managed to briefly capture Hana. Using a boarding party while Jinwoo was sleeping, they transported her to the prison ship and placed her in a maximum security cell designed to hold the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy. Jinwoo woke up to find his bonded human missing, and his response shook the entire battle group. The young dragon simply walked through the molecular bonds holding his ship together, appearing instantly aboard the prison vessel. Walls that should have been impenetrable became as permeable as air when he decided to pass through them. The security footage from that rescue became legendary among coalition military personnel. Jinwoo moved through the ship like gravity, and physics were suggestions he chose to ignore. Energy barriers that could stop plasma bolts had no effect on him. When guards tried to use stun weapons, the energy was simply absorbed into his scales and redirected to improve the lighting in the corridors. Within minutes, he had reconstructed Hana's cell into a comfortable living space, complete with proper air circulation and temperature control. The molecular prisons that had held thousands of criminals were rebuilt into gardens filled with crystalline flowers that provided both beauty and nutrition. After the third escape, Admiral Daewon finally admitted that traditional military methods would not work. The creature they were dealing with viewed physical barriers as temporary inconveniences rather than real obstacles. It was time to try a different approach. Dr. Minji became the first human to establish meaningful scientific contact with Jinwoo. The coalition's leading xenobiologist approached the situation with curiosity rather than fear, treating the dragon as a fellow intelligent being rather than a threat to be contained. Her initial observations revealed abilities that challenged everything science thought it knew about biology and physics. Jinwoo could manipulate matter at the molecular level simply by touching it, rearranging atomic structures to create materials that should not exist. His scales contained microscopic organisms that seemed to bridge the gap between living tissue and mechanical components. But the most important discovery came when Dr. Minji established neural contact with Jinwoo using equipment designed to communicate with dolphin-like species from the Centauri system. Through this connection, she learned that dragons were not mythological creatures but ancient galactic gardeners who had been shaping star systems for millions of years. The galaxy that humans thought they had explored and colonized on their own had actually been carefully cultivated by dragon civilization. Planets with the right atmosphere and gravity for life had been seeded and guided in their development. Trade routes that seemed naturally efficient had been designed to encourage contact between compatible species. Humanity had been living in a garden without knowing it. But the dragon civilization faced a problem that even their advanced technology could not solve alone. The universe itself was dying, not from war or plague, but from the natural expansion and cooling that would eventually lead to heat death. Stars would burn out, galaxies would drift apart, and all life would end in cold darkness. The dragons had spent millions of years searching for a solution, and they had found one that required the cooperation of younger species. By merging their ancient knowledge with the adaptability and creativity of races like humanity, They could create hybrid civilizations capable of surviving the end of the universe, and perhaps even preventing it. Jinwoo was not just a rescued hatchling. He was a living library containing the complete technological and cultural heritage of his species. His bond with Hana had activated protocols designed to test whether humans were ready for this knowledge and capable of using it wisely. The modifications to her ship were proof of concept for technology that could revolutionize galactic civilization. The biomechanical systems could be scaled up to transform entire fleets into living organisms capable of self-repair, adaptation, and reproduction. Space stations could become artificial ecosystems. Planets could be converted into vast thinking entities capable of surviving the death of their stars. But this transformation could not be forced. It required willing participation from both species, a partnership based on trust and mutual benefit. The Dragon technology enhanced rather than replaced human capabilities, creating something greater than either species could achieve alone. Dr. Minji's research findings sent shockwaves through the coalition government. Politicians who had seen Jinwoo as an invasion threat now had to consider that he might be offering humanity's only chance for long-term survival. Military leaders who wanted to capture the Dragon technology realized that it could not be taken by force. The resistance within the coalition remained fierce. Many officials refused to believe that humanity needed help from alien species, no matter how advanced. They saw the Dragon influence as a loss of human independence that must be stopped at any cost. When diplomatic solutions failed to resolve the crisis, these hardliners turned to more desperate measures. Secret weapons projects began developing technology specifically designed to sever the bioneural links between humans and dragons. If they could not capture the alien technology, they would make sure no one could use it. Admiral Sungmin found himself caught between two sides preparing for war. He had seen the external threat through Jinwoo's visions and knew that humanity could not survive it with traditional weapons. But he also understood the fears of those who saw the Dragon partnership as the end of human civilization, as they knew it. The choice was no longer whether to accept the Dragons as allies, but whether humanity would tear itself apart arguing about it while the real enemy approached from the darkness between galaxies. The coalition civil war began when Captain Hyun led a special task force equipped with quantum disruptors designed to break the bond between Hana and Jinwoo. Hyun had been Hana's roommate at the Space Academy years ago, and she believed she was saving her old friend from alien mind control. The attack came without warning near the Proxima station. 15 military ships surrounded Hana's vessel and opened fire with weapons that had never been tested in real combat. The quantum disruptors were supposed to destabilize Jinwoo's molecular structure and force him back into normal physical laws. Instead, the weapons triggered a response that no one had predicted. Hana's ship did not just defend itself, it began actively converting the attacking vessels. The quantum energy from the disruptors was absorbed and redirected, creating bioneural bridges between her ship and the coalition fleet. The crew of the lead destroyer found their ship transforming around them. Metal bulkheads became living walls that pulsed with gentle light. Control panels grew organic interfaces that responded to thought rather than touch. Weapon systems were rebuilt into defensive networks that protected rather than destroyed. But the most amazing part was that the crews retained complete control of their minds and personalities. The bioneural network enhanced their abilities without replacing their human thoughts. They could access vast databases of information, communicate instantly with other ships, and understand complex technical systems that had previously required years of training. The transformation was not forced or violent. Each crew member could choose to disconnect from the network at any time. But very few did once they experienced the expanded awareness and deep sense of connection that came with the hybrid state. They were still human, but they had become something more. Captain Hyun watched in horror as ship after ship in her task force chose to join the growing hybrid fleet. Her weapons officers reported that they could not bring themselves to fire on vessels crewed by people they knew and had served with. The enemy was their own friends and colleagues, who claimed to be happier and more capable than ever before. During the battle, Jinwoo revealed abilities that even Hana had not suspected. The young dragon was no longer the small creature she had rescued from the wreckage. His scales now held patterns that seemed to contain the light of distant stars, and his eyes showed depths of knowledge accumulated over millions of years. Through their neural link, Hana learned that Jinwoo was not just any dragon. He was the last of the first generation, carrying within his genetic structure the complete memory and wisdom of his entire civilization. Every song they had sung, every world they had shaped, every scientific breakthrough they had achieved was stored in his living tissue. His bond with Hana had been the key that unlocked this vast library of knowledge. The protocols built into his DNA recognized humans as a species worthy of inheriting dragon wisdom. The ship modifications, the bio-neural networks, the hybrid technology were all gifts from a dying civilization to one that might survive what was coming. Word of the battle spread through coalition space faster than military sensors could contain. News reports spoke of ships that moved like living creatures and crews who had gained abilities beyond normal human limits. Some called it an invasion, others called it evolution. The hybrid fleet continued to grow as more coalition ships encountered them, not through conquest or force but through voluntary choice. Crews who saw the enhanced capabilities and genuine happiness of the converted chose to join them. The bio-neural network offered knowledge, purpose, and connection that many had never experienced in traditional military service. Admiral Sungmin faced mass defections from his own battle group as officers requested transfer to hybrid vessels. When he tried to court-martial them for desertion, the proceedings became recruitment events as more personnel learned about the benefits of the Dragon partnership. The external threat that Jinwoo had warned about was approaching faster than anyone had calculated. Long-range sensors detected massive disturbances at the galactic rim where entire star systems were going dark. The Devourers, as they came to be called, were consuming everything in their path and growing stronger with each system they destroyed. Admiral Sungmin finally made contact with Hana directly through the bio-neural network. The experience was unlike anything he had ever felt. For a brief moment, he shared her expanded awareness and saw the galaxy through dragon perspective. He understood the true scale of the approaching threat and realized that traditional weapons would be useless against it. The Devourers were not just destroying civilizations, they were unmaking the basic structures of space and time itself. They left behind regions where the laws of physics no longer worked properly, where matter could not exist in stable forms. It was not conquest, but complete annihilation. Through Jinwoo's ancient memories, Admiral Sungmin saw that this threat had appeared before in other galaxies. The dragons had fled from it once, millions of years ago, abandoning their original home to start over in what humans called the Milky Way. But there was nowhere left to run. This was their last stand. The bio-neural hybrid technology was not just an advancement, it was a weapon specifically designed to fight enemies that consumed normal matter and energy. The living ships could exist partially outside normal space-time, making them difficult for the Devourers to detect and impossible for them to fully destroy. Captain Hyon's task force finally stood down when the first Devourer scout ships entered the outer rim of their galaxy. Faced with an enemy that made their civil war look like a minor disagreement, the coalition forces had to choose between fighting each other or working together to survive. The hybrid fleet had grown to over 100 ships by the time they received the distress call from Kepler Station. The massive space dock was under attack by advanced scouts of the Devourer fleet, and their conventional weapons were having no effect on the alien entities. It was time for the dragon-human hybrid technology to face its ultimate test. The external threat arrived 3 months ahead of every prediction. Massive biomechanical entities emerged from the space between galaxies, moving like a plague across star systems and leaving only dead void in their wake. The Devourers consumed not just planets and stars, but the very fabric of space-time itself. Kepler Station's distress call was cut short when the space dock simply ceased to exist, not destroyed or blown apart, but completely removed from reality as if it had never been built. The rescue fleet that arrived found only empty space where the station should have been, with no debris or energy traces to show what had happened. Hana led the first hybrid fleet against the Devourers with Jinwoo now fully grown into his adult form. The dragon had become magnificent, his scales containing patterns that seemed to hold entire star maps, his wings spanning dimensions that normal eyes could not perceive. But more important than his size was the vast knowledge he now shared, freely through the bio-neural network. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. The hybrid ships moved through space like schools of living fish, coordinating their actions through shared consciousness while maintaining individual creativity and initiative. They could phase in and out of normal space-time, appearing behind enemy formations or seeming to be in multiple locations at once. But the Devourers were equally strange opponents. They looked like enormous jellyfish made of dark energy, with tentacles that could reach across entire solar systems. Where they touched planets, those worlds would fade from existence like old photographs left in sunlight. Stars touched by their influence would flicker and die, their nuclear fires somehow turned off like candle flames. The first major engagement took place in the Vega system. Traditional coalition warships tried to establish defensive positions around the inhabited planets, but their weapons passed harmlessly through the Devourer entities. Plasma bolts, nuclear missiles, and energy beams had no effect on beings that existed partially outside normal reality. The hybrid fleet engaged the enemy using completely different tactics. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourers, they began seeding the space around them with new forms of matter energy that the alien entities could not process or consume. These exotic materials created zones of living space that actively resisted the Devourers' reality-eating abilities. Jinwu's adult powers proved crucial to the battle strategy. He could create stable pockets of enhanced space-time that served as anchors for normal reality. Working with Hana through their neural bond, he taught other hybrid ships how to generate similar effects on a smaller scale. The Devourers found themselves unable to adapt to this new form of resistance. Where they had consumed everything else by simply touching it, the living space created by the hybrid technology actively fought back. Areas that should have been easy to unmake instead became more real and stable than they had been before. The war lasted 3 years and transformed the galaxy forever. Hybrid colonies spread across liberated star systems, each one unique in how it interpreted the merger of human and dragon technology. Some became living worlds where the boundary between biology and geology disappeared. Others developed into vast thinking entities that could contemplate problems across centuries. Humans who chose to remain unmodified were welcomed as essential members of the new civilization. Their baseline perspective served as an anchor for hybrid consciousness that might otherwise drift too far from its origins. Many chose to become bridges between the two states of existence, helping newly converted humans adjust to their expanded awareness. The victory over the Devourers was achieved not through superior weapons, but through fundamental transformation of reality itself. The hybrid civilization had learned to create rather than just consume, to build rather than just destroy. Where the Devourers left dead space, the dragon-human partnership restored life and possibility. Hana's original ship had grown into something that defied easy description. Part space station, part living creature, part pocket dimension, it orbited Earth as a symbol of what humanity had become. She remained recognizably herself while serving as the primary bridge between human and dragon consciousness. Visitors to her ship entity often struggled to understand what they were seeing. Corridors that led to rooms on distant planets, gardens that grew in the vacuum of space, libraries where books wrote themselves based on the reader's interests. It was a place where the impossible had become routine, and the magical had become. Scientific Jinwu had evolved as well, his consciousness now distributed across multiple dimensions while maintaining his bond with Hana. He could appear as the small hatchling she had rescued when she needed comfort, or manifest as a cosmic entity capable of shaping star systems when greater work was required. The galaxy they had saved was no longer the same place where Hana had once made her living as a simple salvager. Trade routes now included living ships that could travel through folded space. Planets had become partners in their own terraforming, actively cooperating with their inhabitants to create perfect environments. Stars themselves had been awakened to consciousness and served as vast thinking entities contemplating the deepest mysteries of existence. The age of dragons had officially ended with Jinwoo's generation, but the age of dragon-touched humanity had just begun. The hybrid civilization was still learning what it could become, still discovering new possibilities that emerged from the merger of ancient wisdom and human creativity. As Hana stood on the observation deck of her transformed ship, watching Earth turn slowly below them, she thought about the scared salvager who had found a glowing egg in a derelict warship. That woman could never have imagined that her simple act of rescue would reshape the destiny of two civilizations and save the galaxy from extinction. The universe itself had become their den, every star a potential home, every planet a canvas for new forms of life. The future stretched ahead of them, filled with infinite possibility, and for the first time in galactic history, there was enough time and space for everything they dreamed of becoming.